Welcome to Newsmakers for inside analysis and behind-the-scenes commentary from Santa Barbara's top journalists about the most important news events in our community. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. Tonight, we look behind these headlines. City Hall's abuzz with a tale of two parking lots, one for a big homeless project and the other for a new cop shop. Mayor Kathy Murillo takes a page from Donald Trump's book and moves to silence her loudest critic. As winter weather, not to mention climate change, arrive, lawmakers look to beef up emergency warning communication systems. And wealthy leaders of the secretive Bellosquardo Estate Board offer the first hints about what they plan for us peons. Our panel tonight, Nick Welsh, executive editor of the Santa Barbara Independent, political reporter Josh Molina, Kathryn Barnes, producer for KCRW-FM, and Tyler Hayden, news editor of The Independent. Thank you all for coming. So Nick, our elected leaders are enraging everyone who shops at the farmers market while simultaneously infuriating neighbors and commuters with sudden news about a 40-unit homeless project. What is the tale of two parking lots?
The tale of two parking lots kind of broke last week, where it's actually been building. Last week we found out that the Housing Authority of Santa Barbara and the city and College Hospital were going to put 40 what they call tiny homes, which are 120 square foot trailers essentially, at the commuter parking lot at Carrillo and Castillo Streets. And this would be transitional housing for the most high vulnerability, service-resistant, homeless people who wind up going to the ER, going to jail, getting arrested, getting sort of repeat hardcore offenders.
But the neighbors didn't know about it.
And the neighbors didn't know about it, and so the neighbors found out about it with a notice on their doors on Saturday 2 weeks ago, Saturday afternoon. The council meeting was on Tuesday. The vote for a grant application that had to be submitted by that Friday. So that's all last week. Now, so at that point it was a $6.5 million project. It was actually quite creative and ambitious.
What's the second parking lot?
The second parking lot? You don't want to hear about this parking lot?
No, we'll go back to this one.
You don't want to hear about this parking lot?
We'll go back to this.
The second parking lot is Coda Street parking lot, where the farmers market takes place. And so the city needs a new police station. The old one was built in 1958, 59. It is a nightmare. They've needed it fixed for a long time, so they want to put a new parking lot somewhere. Where? We don't know, so they look at 9 places. They say, oh, we've got 2 places out of 9 that make sense. One's the Coda Street lot, and one's the Louise Lowry Davis, where they do the lawn bowling. That one is, really, of the 2, there's only one, and that's the Coda Street lot. And
because the lawn bowling lobby is so powerful?
Because the lawn bowling lobby is all powerful. This is Santa Barbara, the home of the nearly wed and the newly dead. So that is, but it's actually more complicated than that. There would have to be an election to allow the lawn bowling site to be used for anything other.
But not to displace the farmers market.
But not to displace the farmers market. So that really makes it. It's going to be the farmers market. They haven't announced that. They're not going to announce it, but that's the deal. Farmers market, that's 3,000 to 5,000 people a week go there. And that's a religious sort of shopping experience and communal experience for a whole lot of people in town. And to find out so abruptly without a lot of advance warning and hand-holding was really kind of not the way to do it.
Right. And is this typical, Josh, of the city council? Is it not? And I think you'll agree with me that just blindsiding neighbors and not building community support for projects is pretty typical.
Well, I don't know if it's typical, but it's exactly what they did with these 2 sites. They did not notify them that tiny homes for the homeless was part of what was being considered with this grant. You could go look up the staff report. It does not mention it. It's only in a PowerPoint that was presented at the meeting. As far as the farmers market, there was, same thing. People were blindsided. And you can get a lot done if you do outreach, you start early, you build support, you work with people, you get them to buy into what's happening. And City of Santa Barbara for the most part, does things well when it comes to that, but they certainly dropped the ball in both of these instances. The farmer's market is not just, let me go buy a few strawberries and apples and kale. When you go down there, you see people you know, you talk, you chit-chat, and it is a melting pot. You have families, you have senior citizens, you have young people. It's a really kind of a fun experience. So they're going to try to recreate that somewhere else, and we'll see how that happens.
Have they talked about other lots where they could have the farmer's market?
One of the lots they talked about is Delaware Plaza. That's probably the number one contender, I think, right now. They've talked about Louise Lowry Davis, maybe there. They've talked about, there's a lot 11, which is down by Chapala and Santa Barbara Streets. No, Haley and Santa Barbara Streets.
But what about the parking? I mean, they are going to do away with parking lots.
Well, they will lose the parking lot. The Curtis Street lot's about 325 spaces, and that's significant.
Yeah.
There are other. What's interesting, we hear all the time how Santa Barbara is so dramatically underparked. We don't have enough parking, but the reality is, like, a lot of the lots are 50% occupied during the course of the day. I don't think that is an insurmountable problem. It's an issue. They will have to find other places, but I've been told that if you did an inventory of all the lots, there's enough empty spaces that you could accommodate.
So going back to the tiny homes, I understand that you think on the merits this is a really good idea because it gets to the issue of people who are using a lot of services repeatedly and so on. At least addresses that. But is there organized opposition in the neighborhood, or will there be? It's kind of a weird.
Well, at this point, the project is sort of in abeyance. There's a huge question mark. It was a $6.5 million proposal. They just got a $2 million grant, so they have to figure out how to cut it into a third.
So it's back to square one.
So it's not back to square one, but maybe square two. I think if they could get 22 tiny homes, they would be thrilled. There was a meeting last night, Wednesday night, at the Louise Lowry Davis. All roads lead there, it seems. And it was packed. And it was Santa Barbara karaoke political culture at its finest. I mean, it was, everybody got up there, and for the most, there were a couple of wingnuts who went off, but people were really on point, on target, and there were people.
Can we get them on the show, do you think?
They may be here. And you know, people spoke passionately and eloquently, like why this was a great idea, and why this was a great idea, but for someplace else at another time.
Yeah. All right. Well, these are both going to be ongoing, obviously, for some time.
Could they turn the police station into a parking lot once they move out of there?
Ooh,
you know what?
Nice thinking.
Hey.
Maybe a homeless shelter.
Hey.
Hey, maybe
what district
tiny
do you live in?
lot.
Maybe we could
I'm
get
in the
Tyler.
county.
We
I'm in
get
the county,
Tyler.
man.
That's Greg Hart's district.
Oh. Okay. We'll talk about him. Okay, Josh. If you look up thin skin in the dictionary, you find a picture of Kathy Murillo, who's now clamping down on her most vociferous critic. Who is that, and why is she doing this?
I've not been this disappointed at a city council meeting since Room 15 ran out of cookies when they were swearing in the new elected officials.
On the day of the, on the day of the mudslides in Montecito.
They always run out of cookies. By the time I'm done interviewing people, they're gone. And I actually, I got up and I had to do some reporting after the meeting, but basically.
Why don't you tell us more about that, Josh?
Why don't you, next time, why don't you start the show with me instead of
But I digress.
Too much background, Nick.
So what
Get to the guts.
So Anna Marie Gott. Isn't this really about Anna Marie Gott? That'll get your attention.
So the council eliminated the ability to pull time. So when you go to the council meeting, you can have Tyler, give me your 2 minutes of speaking time. Nick, Kathryn, give me your 2 minutes.
That's
All
kind
of a
of
sudden,
the way you work it on this show anyway.
Exactly, right. I need 15 minutes, right? I don't care about anyone else. Okay, so that was the way it had worked. And then the council, Kathy, at this, what was it, the retreat that they had, they decided that they were going to limit this. They didn't decide, they talked about it. And then they decided at a meeting to limit public comment. So no more pulling. You get 3 minutes max. That's you. You don't get to borrow other people's time. And this is done, in my opinion, as a total response to Anna Marie Gott, who's an activist at City Hall. She is the only one who, recently, in the last 6 months, who routinely borrows time and spends 6, 8, a couple times 10 minutes, where she'll talk during public comment.
She does rant, but she has a lot of facts as well.
Yeah, and she, she talks at you. She doesn't talk to you, and she's very firm, and she doesn't.
And she doesn't like Kathy.
She's not sensitive about how she delivers her comments, and she does not like Kathy at all, and she said that publicly. What was interesting was that Kathy said during the meeting, this does not have anything to do with any one person.
And she said it didn't have anything to do with Columbus Day, too, when they changed that.
And she also said, I agree with Anna Marie Gott 50% of the time. And it just felt like a very disingenuous statement because
there's a switch.
The truth is that it was done exactly to stop her because she is the most vocal critic of the mayor. She has been critical of other council members, the city administration, the city staff, the city attorney. And so they basically said, hey, we're going to limit her and punish everyone else. Not a lot of people full time, but the truth is, if somebody wants to go to City Hall next week and wants 4 minutes, they can't do it.
Well, there's a lot of people who have opinions who don't feel comfortable testifying and gave her their time.
And the truth is, the people who Anna Marie Gott are speaking for, these aren't sort of people who don't feel comfortable speaking in front of a mic. These are people that she has come to the meeting. You have to be present to borrow someone's time. So these are people who come knowing this is just a way to increase Anna Marie's time. But my deal is that's part of the deal. That's part of the game.
Exactly.
You're an elected official. You should be able to put up with Anna Marie Gott or anyone else saying stuff. She's not there every week. She's probably there 3 out of 4 meetings. And that's what she does. And now everybody is punished because she has been vocal in her criticism. And yes, she can be somebody who she grates on you, right? But that's part of being an elected official.
She has legitimate points.
Here's what I mean. I think it was just a really dumb move. For an elected official to try to put the lid on public criticism at this time in history, this is a bad look.
A point that Oscar actually made.
But I will say, I got a phone call from Councilmember Randy Rouse saying, I was pushing for this every bit as hard as Kathy Murillo, and we didn't want Wayne Scholes, and we didn't want Pete Del Bello and other people who have sort of used it as sort of an open mic night. I don't know if it was as exclusively Kathy versus Anne Marie, but Anne Marie obviously, again, it's a really bad thing. But I listened to Anne Marie, but after like 3 minutes, she's pretty much made her points, and after like 3 to 4 or 5 to 6 minutes,
which is certainly not true of any member of the city council.
We're kind of like, it's hard to follow.
But the truth is that, I am at that council chamber every week. No one else does it. Pete Del Bello used to do it about 1.5 years ago, once in a while.
Well, we're talking actually more recent.
When was the last time Pete's been at City Hall? He's not been at City Hall.
Since after she was elected.
All right. But Kathryn, do you agree with me?
On what?
Just yes.
Pretty much everything. Don't you agree with me that this is the most heinous censorship, anti-First Amendment movement since Donald Trump banned Jim Acosta from the White House press room?
Wow. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it seems like the balance could have been that there was a maximum, like a limit of maybe 6 minutes.
That's what they did.
They did do 6,
but
so she can talk to
That's 4, right?
No, it's 2 different things.
Oh,
I am the
yeah.
expert on this issue. Allow me to mansplain. Okay,
Yeah.
So the stuff that's not on the agenda,
Oh, right.
3 minutes. Something that is on the agenda, tiny homes, the HEAP grant, 5 minutes max. You still have to have somebody in the room to borrow that time. As a practical matter, Jerry, the meetings are not longer because
Don't
of
throw my cliches in my face.
The meetings are not longer because of Anna Marie Gott. She's the only one who does it regularly. SEIU did it. They spoke for 57 minutes recently, okay? But that was a one-time thing.
Yeah, but they give campaign contributions too, so
But
that's
she's
okay.
She's the only one. A better way, right? What I think people expect from their elected officials is, hey, Anna Marie Gott, let's sit down, let's talk, let's figure out a way that we can meet in the middle, so you don't have to come here every week
Those days
and
are over.
yell at us.
Those
And
days
that's
are
not
over.
what's happening.
Tin horn
Didn't Friedman
despot.
make the point that other jurisdictions like the county or Carpinteria, Goleta, they don't allow
Right.
full time, right? So the city's kind of just joining with the norm for other councils.
Yeah, and on one hand, so he's using that to say, well, Goleta doesn't, but on the other hand, Santa Barbara likes to say we're progressive, we do things our own way. But yeah, that's the point Friedman said. Goleta and Carpinteria don't allow it, so why should we?
And the county doesn't allow it.
It's a bad look. Does anybody think it's not a bad look?
By the way, first time Oscar Gutierrez, in my memory, voted differently than Kathy Murillo
Yeah.
on this
He
issue.
made a good point. He made the Trump point first. That's where I got it from. So, did Kathy understand that? Or probably. Anyway, so Kathryn, Hannah Beth and Monique had a hearing in CARP this week about expanding and improving emergency communications when disaster looms. What was your takeaway from that?
Well, as we all know, there's disasters, it seems like every day, and this area has been hit with the Thomas Fire and then the mudslides, and there's been fires up and down California the past year. So yeah, they held this hearing. It was one of a few different public hearings they've held around the state regarding this, and it's kind of just they were collecting information from various county officials all over the state about what their emergency system looks like, emergency communication system looks like, what are the problems they're seeing, and then ways that they can address it. So they spoke for 4 hours, speaking of long meetings, and really, I think what the big issue is that when these disasters happen, all of the ways that we typically communicate through the internet or through cell phone lines, I mean, none of those are completely reliable. So they're not only figuring out what are the best ways to communicate, but what happens if we can't rely on them.
So in terms of the cell phones, there's at least two issues, right? There's the hardening of the infrastructure for cell phones, but isn't there also that not everybody signed up, right? I
Right.
mean, it's still a voluntary thing.
Yeah, so in California, it's really, there's no statewide system. Every county does their own thing. And in Santa Barbara County, there's this Aware and Prepare system. You have to sign up your name, your number, your zip code, your address.
To opt in.
You have to opt in, and right now, I think about only 12% of county residents have opted in. That's the whole county, so it is higher percentages in like the city of Santa Barbara and Montecito. It's a little bit higher, but it's still not really where they want to be. And so there is some legislation that Senator Jackson is trying to push through, and I think it will become law next year, which potentially will make it so that they can get information from cell phone companies, from utility companies, get phone numbers, and opt people in, or put people in the system themselves.
How much of a factor was the lack of people being signed up in the debris flow, in the fatalities?
That's a good question. I mean, if it's only 12% now, I'm sure it was even lower then. Though you don't necessarily have to be signed up to get what's called a WIA alert. That's a federal system that counties can sign up to use, and we signed up a couple years ago. So the people who got like pretty much the only like emergency alert in the midst of the debris flow was a WIA alert, and some people didn't get that for some reason. Like Verizon didn't broadcast.
Was that
it.
the one that came late?
Yeah, that one's like kind of after the fact or in the middle of it, really. So yeah, I mean, as Kathryn said, every county's kind of wrestling with how best to do this because there's no master playbook yet, and people have their own sort of systems of how to get the information from the field to their emergency managers. I thought what was interesting, I think it came from San Diego, the San Diego emergency manager. She was saying that everything, all cities and all jurisdictions, they go through basically her and her office. So there's a single point person who's making sort of the final decisions on what message goes out and what it says. Right now we have kind of a weird patchwork of different systems, different jurisdictions. I mean, the city's got its own emergency system. Goleta does actually too. The county does. So I think what I found most interesting was sort of streamlining and simplifying would be the best. Also, San Diego gets people to sign up by giving out free tacos
Oh, well, there you go.
and Lyft rides. I thought was
that's a
brilliant.
good idea.
Donuts,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, my
go
biggest
ahead.
takeaway with this was that it seemed like governments are struggling to work with cell phone companies to really get the information that they need. Whether that's, why didn't people get this message, this WIA alert, who didn't get it, and then how can we not only opt these people in, but work with the cell phone companies to maybe geolocate people. So maybe someone, you don't actually, they don't live in Montecito, they're visiting Montecito. This mudslide comes and their cell phone knows that they're in Montecito, and so they get that alert. Maybe there's some ways that the government can work with cell phone companies to do that, but right now, as far as Robert Lewin from the Office of Emergency Management was talking about, they're having a really hard time talking to these cell phone companies to get any information.
Because they don't want to give up the information, because there's a privacy issue, or because it costs money, or because they don't want to be regulated, or all
Probably
of the,
1 and 3. I think it would be that they don't want to be regulated, or that they don't want that right now that there's no requirement that the government's asking these cell phone companies information and they have to give it up, and it probably would take a long time to compile this kind of information. But unless there's some kind of exchange, we rely on our cell phones, and if they're not getting to ourselves, these alerts aren't getting there, then there needs to be some kind of communication.
that's really the whole game is cell phones and cell service. I mean, there's not any other alternatives.
Because you can't rely on the internet at this time. And I mean, the other kind of school of thought that I've heard from the executive director of Direct Relief, Thomas Tighe, he thinks it should be, super old school. Like there should be neighborhood leaders and like sounding alarms that go off when there's a disaster. And we shouldn't be relying on tech because that can, be destroyed in an instant. But really, we should be like super grassroots about it.
And the county is restarting its Radio Ready program. So it's basically, there's a bunch of stations that opt in or sign up with the county, and then during an emergency, they all broadcast the county messages about evacuations, warnings, and stuff. So, and I mean that seems like a reliable method too. You just need fresh batteries and a radio. It's like it's old school, but it seems like you don't need Wi-Fi for that.
Nah.
Jerry, that was an amazing triple barrel question.
Thank you.
Regulation, cost, privacy.
Can you remember 3 things?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't sure if you were.
I used to be a reporter. I don't know.
Don't you teach them not to do the triple barrel question? Allow them to answer one?
No, I don't. All right, Tyler, you scooped the first hints of what the secretive governing board of Bellosquardo Estate is aiming to do. What do they want to do?
Well, during their inaugural gala a couple weeks ago, the foundation board chair, Dick Wolf of Law and Order fame, he talked about his great love for the Frick collection, which is out in New York, and how Bellosquardo could be a version of that, could be the West Coast Frick. And I had to look it up. I hadn't heard of the Frick. It's housed in a home of who, coincidentally, and Nick pointed this out today, was another robber baron. So the Clark estate, was William Clark, who was infamous for his shenanigans.
Mining and timber ripoff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Henry C. Clark, Frick. Yeah, thank you. He was an industrialist and a very wealthy man, and he amassed this huge art collection that is still housed there, and they've collected even more over the years. So it's the first sort of glimpse at what they might be thinking about doing over there to fulfill what Wolf called their lack.
But this is Wolf, right? I mean, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing communitarian about this process that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, not so far. Though what's interesting too is he and his wife are big collectors of Renaissance era art, and so he does have, an interest in assume some
getting
some
a tax
knowledge.
write-off to put his.
Yeah.
Is the Frick Museum related to Ford Frick, former commissioner of baseball?
No, this is Henry Clay Frick, who in 1889 was responsible for the Johnstown flood of Pennsylvania, where 2,200 people drowned.
There's a local story.
Yeah,
Speaking of
2,200
disaster,
people.
and no cell phones.
No
at that
cell
time.
phones.
Were you invited to the gala?
I did not get that.
Catherine, were you invited
No,
to
no,
that?
It must have
exactly.
been on
I had my
the
dress
radio.
shocking.
No, I credit you for standing outside and being the kind of the red carpet guy, interviewing people.
Ryan Seacrest, right here.
Ryan Seacrest, that's what I was trying to think. You're always good with those cultural. Were you invited?
I had to coach my son that night, so I was.
So you were
unavailable.
invited.
Sure, Jerry. I'm first on the list.
Do you
yes.
agree with Ernie Solomon that this whole thing is an outrageous ripoff and the Attorney General should be investigating aggressively?
I don't know if I care anymore, to be honest.
Yeah,
Because
does anyone even want to go up there?
I don't know. I mean, I think what the issue that people have is sort of, and it's going back in time, is how this thing was formed, who's leading it, and it's the whole Helene, Jeremy Lindemann. Yeah, but it's just a silly scandal, and let's just move on.
well, thanks. We got a couple more minutes here.
No, I think it's a legit question though, because when they presented this, when they had their big coming out
great
party,
public.
yeah, Helene took people up. She was gave tours and said this is going to be a great public art institution, and that's what Clark said in her will.
That's what you said in your cover story in the
Yeah.
Independent.
Oh yeah, for sure. And because that's what we believed at the time too, and so the fact that it's been 4 years, more than 4 years now, since those promises were made. I mean, you do have to account for the IRS stuff that was going on for a few years, that it was tied up in these back tax issues. But that was solved a year ago, and there's no sort of like momentum or movement seemingly around
Alexa, stand up.
around making this what they promised they were going to make it, and they could have some great plans, some amazing ideas, but we just don't know about it.
But it's just Dick Wolf, right? Dick Wolf.
There's a board of directors, and I mean, but yeah, it's just.
How outraged are you that Lindemann's been getting six figures for years and years on this, on a scale of 1 to 5?
I learned a long time ago not to worry about things I can't control, Jerry.
What are you? NFL guy or something? How outraged are you on a scale of 1 to 5?
Yeah, maybe 0.
Have you guys done anything about the Bellosquardo scandal?
No.
See?
Why do you keep writing about it?
I'm done. That was it. That was it.
It's on a cliff and it's going to erode anyway
Yeah,
when the sea level
yeah.
comes.
That's a
so
really good point.
Sea
whatever.
level rise is going to take this as well as like 66 acres of
Oh, we
beaches.
didn't get to that.
It's going to be a bunch of boring
yeah.
antiques and Renaissance art.
Yeah, it's going to be a
Yeah,
nice
Santa
art
Barbara
gallery
doesn't
where
even
you
care
won't
about
go.
We talked Bellosquardo, but forgot climate change.
Just go to Dick Wolf's house.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks a lot for that.
Wait for the sign.
Thanks to Nick Welsh, Josh Molina, Kathryn Barnes, and Tyler Hayes. And thank you for watching, especially on our Facebook feed. Please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com, and our YouTube channel, where you'll find an archive of past shows and interviews, should your insomnia be particularly troublesome. Thanks again to our director, J.P. Montalvo, to our crew, Lizzie, Elliot, Tristan, and Erica, and as always, to our senior high-powered executive producer, Hap Freund. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.